In this section, we're going to look at some additional functionality and features of Mocha. One of the things that we've seen is we can use describe functions to group our tests. But we can also nest describe functions in order to group them on multiple levels. For example, if we wanted to take all of our tests and group them all together under a section called number tests, we could do that easily. I've added the opening describe. I'll take all this additional code down to this point, indent it one level, add in the closing curly brace and parenthesis, fix a couple of linting errors, and if I save and run my tests, you can see that we've grouped our isEven and add without setup and teardown groupings inside of the number tests grouping. And we can do this as many levels deep as is necessary. Another thing that we can do with Mocha is we can skip certain tests if we need to. Let's say, for example, we've decided that this second test down here is no longer necessary and we want to skip it. Perhaps this is temporary though and we don't want to delete it, we just want to skip it for now. We can add a call to it.skip instead of just it. Save that change and rerun our tests, and you can see that it's now being skipped. Mocha tells us that 3 are passing and 1 is pending, which is essentially its way of saying it's been skipped. There's a simpler way of doing this. Instead of adding a call to it.skip, you can just change the it to an xit, and we get the same functionality. We can do those same exact things to describe functions. So if I want to skip this second describe, and now it's skipping both of those tests, and the same thing with x. Another thing we can do is tell Mocha that I only want to run a specific describe or a specific test. We can do that with the .only function off of the describe or it function. You can see at this point it's only running those 2 tests. If we add that same thing to the it, we'll get the same result, but now running just that one test. Now I highly recommend that you be very careful whenever doing this, because if you accidentally check in this code, then it's only going to run that one test and you're no longer going to know whether or not your code has broken anything because most of the tests aren't being run. So this is definitely a feature to use sparingly. Now so far we've only had one test file that we've been running, but what if we have 2 test files that we want to run? I'll go in and add a new file, and I'll call this more tests. And I'll add my necessary header. And then I'll just create a simple describe. And I'll create a simple test. And I'll save that in my other file. And then go back out to the command line. And if I want to run both of those files, I just type in Mocha and list both files that I want to run. And you can see that it's now running all 5 of the tests that I've created. This is great, but after you create more and more test files, this can get pretty tedious. So one of the things that Mocha does is that by default, we'll look for specific kinds of files. So if I type in Mocha without any parameters, you can see that it's just running my test.js file. So by default, it will look for a file called test.js in the current directory and run that file. That's only going to be useful if I've got one file and I name it test.js. But what we can do instead is go in and create a new directory called test, and then put both of our files inside of that directory. Then I can go back to the command line and just run Mocha, and it will look inside of that test directory and run all JS files that are inside of that. So in most cases, it's a good idea to put all your files inside of a directory called test. Another thing that Mocha could do that's really nice is watch the files and rerun them whenever they change. And in order to get that to work, you just add the -w flag to Mocha. And it runs the tests once. And if I go back in and change one of the tests and save, you can see that Mocha's already run and let me know that I've broken something. Go back in and fix it. And Mocha runs again and everything's good. So there are a few additional things that you could do with Mocha that can make it really convenient when unit testing your code.